All right, this is the Unit 7 test on the Civil War. Number 1. The American Civil War was a deadly conflict that consumed the United States for more than 4 years. The majority of the battles taking place in the first 2 years, or half of the war, were Confederate victories. As the war progressed into the third year of fighting, the Confederacy began to struggle due to the lack of resources. What major Union victory took place in Pennsylvania in 1863 that became known as the turning point of the war? A. Fredericksburg, B. First Battle of Bull Run, C. Antietam, or D. Gettysburg. Number 2. According to the map of the major battles of the Civil War, what could be a correct conclusion about the Civil War? A. Because there was no northern blockade of the southern coast, the South continued to prosper during the Civil War. B. Few Civil War battles were fought near the Mississippi River, therefore the West remained neutral. C. Most major battles of the Civil War were fought in the Confederate or Southern states. D. The Appalachian Mountains helped to contain most of the Civil War battles towards the east. As the commanding general of the Union forces in 1864, Grant implemented a plan to divide the Southern states and not allow General Lee and his Confederate troops to retreat south. General Sherman marched his army south, winning a decisive, important victory in Atlanta. Under the orders of General Grant, he marched his army east in what became known as Sherman's March to the Sea. What impact did Sherman and his army have in the war as they marched to the sea? A. He waged total war on the South, burning and destroying anything that could support the Confederate army. B. Kill as many civilians as possible so they could not fight in Lee's army or support the Confederate army. C. Destroy the Northern economy to force an end to the war. D. Limit the use of civilian targets at the end of the Civil War. Number 4, based on the quote from Lincoln below, what is Abraham Lincoln's main goal at the beginning of the Civil War? My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union. And it is not to save or to destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it would help save the Union. A, to end slavery in all of the United States. B, to free slaves in the Union only. C, to free slaves in the B, to preserve or save the Union by reuniting the states. C, to free slaves in the Union only. Or D, to object to going to war with the South. Number 5. General Winfield Scott devised the Union strategy for defeating the rebellious Southern states in the early stages of the Civil War. His strategy is depicted to the right and is commonly known as Scott's Great Snake. 2 key components of his plan are represented in the body and head of the snake. What part of the Union strategy is represented by these parts of the snake? A, invading the South through southern ports using a superior naval force. B, freeing all the slaves and enlisting them into the Union Army to gain an advantage through numbers. C, blocking southern ports and cutting off all possible trade with Europe. D, forcing the South to march north and fight the Union on their land. Number 6. All of the following were Confederate advantages at the beginning of the Civil War, except which one? A, more people in the South than in the North. B, knowledge of the land because most of the battles were fought in the South. C, better field generals to win battles. D, high morale or a cause, fighting for a cause and better on horses. Number 7. What does this chart illustrate about the Civil War in U.S. history? A, the Civil War was not important because it was fought between the states. B, the Civil War resulted in more deaths than any other American war. C, the Civil War did not have a large number of casualties. Or D, the Civil War was second to World War II in casualties. Number 8. After the secession of South Carolina, the newly independent states claimed the right and power to control Fort Sumter, a military installation located in the Charleston Harbor in South Carolina. The Union's reluctance to give up the fort to the rebellious state led to the first violent confrontation of the Civil War. What impact did the fighting at Fort Sumter have on the United States? A, South Carolina showed that they could fight as an independent country. B, 7 southern states seceded. C, the Supreme Court declared secession unconstitutional. Or D, the United States declared war on the Confederate States of America. And I further declare and make known that such persons of suitable conditions will be received into the armed service of the United States to garrison forts, positions, stations, and other places, and to man vessels of all sorts in said service. Number 9, President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation had an important impact on the progression of the war in American history. The Emancipation Proclamation was partly a military strategy to increase the chances of a Union victory. How does the above quote from the Emancipation Proclamation support the Union Army in ultimate victory in the war? A, the Northern Draft was removed as a result of the Battle of Gettysburg. B, African Americans were allowed to join the U.S. military. C, the Northern Draft was forced onto border states to increase military support. D, African Americans were not considered citizens and could not be drafted. Number 10. What did Abraham Lincoln do during the Civil War that limited the rights of citizens because you could be jailed without being told why? A, issued the Gettysburg Address. B, issued the Emancipation Proclamation. C, suspended writs of habeas corpus. Or D, suspended personal liberty laws. Number 11. 2 years into the American Civil War, the Union naval blockade was having a devastating impact on the Confederacy's ability to export cotton to European countries. The lack of trade limited the South's ability to import needed supplies and conduct war. What Southern invention was created to combat the Union naval blockade? A, the first ironclad. B, secret code. C, long-range cannon. Or D, underwater bombs. Number 12. All of the following were Union advantages at the beginning of the Civil War, except which one? A, more people in the North than the South. B, knowledge of the land because most of the battles were fought in the North. C, better industry and factories to make weapons. D, more miles of railroad and a larger navy to surround the South. Number 13. The majority of Civil War battles took place in southern states close to the East Coast. Although there were less fighting in the West, it was an important part of the Union strategy. Union General Ulysses S. Grant and his army gained a reputation for winning battles in the Western theater. One of General Grant's greatest and most important victories was at the Battle of Vicksburg, where his army lay siege to a Confederate fort for over a month. What impact did the Union victory at Vicksburg have on the war and the Union strategy known as the Anaconda Plan? A, gave the Union control over the Mississippi River. B, allowed Confederates to break the Union blockade. C, led to support for Confederacy from England. Or D, the Union captured Richmond, Virginia. Number 14. Based on your knowledge in the map of the Civil War, what was the significance of the border states? A, they were not allowed to vote in the presidential elections. B, they were allowed to use sovereignty to decide the slavery issue. C, they did not secede, so they were allowed to keep slavery. D, the slavery was not allowed in the border states by order of President Lincoln. If slavery was the cornerstone of the Confederacy, cotton was its foundation. At home, its social and economic institutions rested upon cotton. Abroad, its diplomacy centered around the well-known dependence on Europe, upon an uninterrupted supply of cotton from the southern states. How does this quote above demonstrate the key component of the Confederacy strategy during the Civil War? A, the South fought most of the battles in the North to protect their cotton crops in the South. B, the North's economy relied on a trade relationship with the South, so this ended the war quickly. C, an abundance of weapons and soldiers. D, reliance on England's support in exchange for Southern cotton. Number 16. The Battle of Antietam took place in September of 1862 in Sharpsburg, Maryland. Both head generals of the Union and Confederate forces brought their armies totaling over 110,000 soldiers. The battle would prove to be the bloodiest single day of battle in the American Civil War and in the history of the United States. Lincoln proclaimed the outcome of the major battle a Union victory over General Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. What was the political impact of the Battle of Antietam? A, southern states in the border area attempted to rejoin the Union. B, President Lincoln decided to issue the Emancipation Proclamation and England remained neutral. C, President Lincoln issued the Proclamation of Amnesty and Reconstruction. D, President Lincoln decided to jail Southern supporters in Maryland. Number 17. The American Civil War was a highly controversial conflict that divided the country for over 4 years. Individuals living in the North that opposed the war and wanted to acknowledge the Confederacy as independent were known as A, Warhawks, B, Peace Stuffs, C, Copperheads, or D, Anacondas. Number 18. The leader of the Confederate forces during the Civil War was A, Ulysses S. Grant, B, Winfield Scott, C, Robert E. Lee, D, George McClellan. Number 19. Since the secession of South Carolina in December of 1860, the United States under President Lincoln's authority refused to recognize the independence of South Carolina. This position towards Southern secession continued in the following years as more states attempted to secede from the Union and the outbreak of war. How does the above electoral college map demonstrate the Union point of view of the existing relationship with Southern states? A. The country was unified over the issue of slavery. B. The Southern states were in rebellion and not eligible to vote. C. The border states were loyal to the Union but were not eligible to vote. Or D. The Southern states were eligible to vote but chose to abstain. Number 20. The American Civil War is referred to as the first modern war in history. This is the result of new inventions and advancements in technology from the first industrial revolution, like the telegraph and railroad. An increase in musket accuracy from the blank led to more soldier casualties on the battlefield. However, the leading cause of death during the war was blank. A. Cannonball and gangrene. B. Musket shrapnel. C. Minie-ball infection. D. Bayonet lack of medicine. #21. Based on the quote from Lincoln above, what is Abraham Lincoln's opinion of Southern secession? A. That the United States Constitution had no provisions in regard to secession. B. Only Congress can vote to allow Southern states to secede. C. It was unconstitutional for states to secede from the Union. D. Secession is a reserved power and it can only be done by individual states. Number 22. Using the Gettysburg Address from above, Lincoln makes it clear that his intent to do which of the following? A. Reunite the Union. B. Honor those who died with the memorial. C. Allow slavery in the South. D. Abolish slavery in the border states. Number 23. What is Lincoln's second objective displayed in the Gettysburg Address? A. Punish the South for war crimes. B. Reconstruct the South. C. End slavery. Or D. Get reelected in 1864. Apprehension seems to exist among the people of the Southern states that by the ascension of a Republican administration, their property and their peace and their personal security are to be endangered. There has never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to their inspection. It is found in nearly all of the published speeches of him who now addresses you. I do but quote from one of these speeches when I declare that I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in these states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so. Number 24. The first time Abraham Lincoln addressed the nation as President of the United States was in his 1861 inaugural address. What Southern apprehension did Lincoln identify and address early in his speech? A. Lincoln was going to ask Congress for a declaration of war against the South. B. Lincoln would endanger their rights and make slavery illegal. C. The Union would not allow the Confederacy to exist as an independent country. Or D. The Union was going to add more free states to weaken the South. Number 25. At the end of President Lincoln's inaugural address, what limitations does he describe in regards to his position as President of the United States and Southern states? A. Lincoln did not have the power or legal right to take away slavery from Southern states. B. Lincoln would not declare war on Southern states. C. The United States Constitution does not allow Lincoln to recognize the Confederacy as independent. D. The United States Constitution is the law of the land and has to be followed in all states. Number 26. The advancement of war technology during the American Civil War made it the bloodiest conflict of the time period. This also led to advancements in medicine and battlefield care of wounded soldiers. Women took an active role working as battlefield nurses and caring for wounded soldiers, increasing the likelihood of survival after being injured in battle. One of the first women to organize nurses was Blank. She later founded the American Blank and was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 1973. A. Elizabeth Staton, Women's Rights Organization. B. Abigail Adams, First Responders. C. Dorothea Dix, Humane Society. D. Clara Barton, Red Cross. Number 27. The first major battle of the Civil War took place in July of 1861 2 months after Confederate troops attacked Fort Sumter. The battle became known as the Battle of Bull Run, named by Confederates for being close to Bull Run Creek. It was also known as the Battle of Manassas, named by the Union for being close to the town of Manassas. How did this battle impact the view of the Civil War for the Union? A. The Union advantages would lead to a swift victory over the less equipped Southern Army. B. The Union victory demonstrated the superior leadership of Northern generals. C. The Confederate advantage of superior weapons devastated the North. D. The Union loss demonstrated that the war would not be short. Using the above text and prior knowledge, who did the Emancipation Proclamation intend to free? A. All slaves. B. Only slaves in the border states. C. Only slaves that would fight for the Union. D. Only slaves in the rebelling southern states. Number 29. The American Civil War was a violent conflict that tore the country apart from 1861 to 1865. During this time, Union and Confederate forces engaged in hundreds of bloody and costly conflicts. As the war came to an end, Confederate states began to rejoin the Union prior to the end of the conflict. Following the last major battle in Richmond, Virginia, General Lee surrendered to General Grant, ending the 4-year conflict. Why was there never a formal peace treaty signed between the Confederate States of America and the United States of America? A. General Lee promised the Confederate forces he would no longer fight. B. General Grant's Union forces destroyed the Confederate Army. C. The United States government made a treaty with the Confederate States of America 3 years after the end of the war. D. The United States government never recognized the Confederate States of America as an independent nation. Number 30. After the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, what political effect had a strong impact on the Confederacy strategy? A. Southern states were able to gain support from England. B. The Southern states were able to gain support from the Northern Democrats. C. Northern states were able to gain support from European nations. D. The document prevented England from supporting Southern states due to their use of slavery. Number 31. For the entire Civil War, several slave states remained part of and loyal to the Union. These states were allowed to continue the institution of slavery as the war continued for 4 years. President Abraham Lincoln excluded these slave states when issuing his Emancipation Proclamation. Why did Lincoln and the Union allow slavery to exist in what became known as the border states? A. Lincoln believed in popular sovereignty. B. Lincoln did not want these states to secede. C. Lincoln saw a need for slavery to exist to keep the economy going. D. Lincoln believed slavery should be a reserve power and the states could choose. Number 32. Where did Lee surrender to Grant? A. Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. B. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. C. Antietam, Maryland. D. Washington, D.C. Number 33. If a soldier was wounded in an arm and a leg, what would be the most likely medical treatment during the Civil War? A. Penicillin. B. Have the mating ball removed. C. Amputation. D. There was no treatment. Death usually followed. Number 34. In the election of 1864, what part of presidential candidate George McClellan's platform appealed to his supporters after 3 years of war? A. Preserving the Union. B. Ending slavery and continuing the war. C. Allowing Southern states to rejoin the Union with slavery. Or D. Ending the war and making a treaty with the Confederate States of America. Number 35. At the end of the Battle of Antietam, there was no clear victor, and the battle became known as being tactically inconclusive. While President Lincoln declared the battle a Union victory, his actions following the results of the battle show it was not a decisive Union victory. What significant event took place at the Battle of Antietam causing President Lincoln to take action? A. The Union won, destroying Lee's army. B. General McClellan was relieved of command for a second time for allowing Lee to retreat. C. General Lee invaded deep into the Union territory. D. Stonewall Jackson was killed by his own men. Number 36. After the election of 1860, South Carolina blanked from the Union, but in the view of Abraham Lincoln and the Union, South Carolina was considered to be in blank. A. Rebelled, constitutional. B. Re-entered, habeas corpus. C. Annexed, Confederacy. D. Seceded, rebellion. Number 37. The Confederacy is credited with the development of the first ironclad battleship in the history of the United States. The first ironclad became known as the CSS Virginia. It was constructed from a previously sunk Union ship called the Merrimac and outfitted with iron plating and coal-burning steam engine. The Southern ingenuity for the construction of the ship was out of the desperation to stop what Union action? A. The blockade of Southern ports. B. Cutting the South in half. C. Control of the Mississippi River. D. Capturing Richmond, Virginia. 38. Who assassinated Abraham Lincoln? A. Lee Harvey Oswald. B. John Wilkes Booth. C. Robert E. Lee. D. J.E.B. Stuart. Number 39. Which amendment is responsible for ending slavery? A. First. B. 5th. C. 13th. D. 18th. Number 40. General Ulysses S. Grant was named commander of all Union forces in 1864. Previously, the Union had several other generals in command of the Union forces. What weakness did this reveal of the Union? A. Majority of Union generals had been killed in combat. B. Lincoln removed previous generals for lack of success. C. Majority of the Union generals were captured or taken prisoner. D. Lincoln gave several generals positions in Congress before the end of the war.